was held in Copenhagen for a couple of days. It included a main stage where many discussions happened, as well as a bunch of networking events that include dinners, cocktails around the event as well. And on the side of the main stage, there was an action stage on which some specific topics were discussed, where audience went into more detail, and there was an opportunity to do Q&A between the audience and the panelists as well. Net Zero Pakistan was featured on the action stage. And there are two reflections I have from that panel discussion, and I'll let Abru and Brooke and Tamara jump in as well. But one of the reflections I have is that we got a lot of exciting response from the audience, because they found it very refreshing to hear, the narrative from a supply chain country that they typically don't get to hear about. And the second, people were really excited to hear about the initiative that we've launched in Pakistan, because it was very new and unique in the textile sector, where you have so many major exporters in a single country making these commitments around net zero, willing to measure their GHG emissions voluntarily by themselves, being able to commit to science-based targets and define those things. Brands loved to hear about these things, because that's exactly the problem they're trying to tackle in their supply chain. And as they see suppliers in a single country proactively taking this initiative, that was music to their ears. Just to give you a sense of the kind of audience we had at the summit overall, the summit included more than 100+ brands that represented themselves with their leadership over there. And that includes names like CEO of Mulberry was there, the CFO of H&M was there. There were leadership from Kering, which is an investor in some of the leading fashion brands. Sustainability leads from Lululemon or Bestseller were there. Brooke, Abru, Tamara, Akhtar, any other brands that come to your name that were there and I might have missed out? I'm sure there were many that I might not have mentioned.
I think Burberry was there, Adidas, Burberry,
yeah,
Studio.
Yeah. Nike were a lead sponsor as well, in addition to a cluster of other peripheral brands. Actually, Polestar was also a lead sponsor. Very interesting, because coming at things from a textile sourcing perspective, but for the automotive industry. So a number of leading brands there, not just in the fashion sector, but those sourcing textiles for other industries too, which is particularly interesting. Yeah.
And by the way, one thing that, and Tamara will get Tamara to say more about that, one of the major announcements at the summit that happened, and after that announcement, it was difficult to get hold of Tamara because she was just so popular and in demand, was that Apparel Impact Institute launched this $250 million decarbonization fund with brands like H&M and others being the lead funders of that. And I think, Tamara, you got quite a high aspiration for increasing the size of that fund as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So you're already jumping into one of my speaking points, of course, because I wanted to tell you about this fund. Of course, I have to tell you because I'm personally very, very excited. But the Apparel Impact Institute, for which I'm working, has announced our 250 million Fashion Climate Fund and introduced the first 4 lead partners, which were Lululemon, H&M Group, H&M Foundation, and the Smith Family Foundation. And what we are trying to do is we are uniting corporate entities and philanthropy, and then use the fund to decarbonize and modernize the fashion industry supply chain. And we are also having more brands who are very committed and where we are still in discussion, so they join the fund. So for us, it was very exciting, and I must say my popularity has risen since then quite significantly. So thank you for all the LinkedIn requests and emails and friendship networking requests. Things have changed significantly since then, but still it doesn't change many of the things that are key takeaways from the summit. So while I'm very excited, and I could certainly tell you 5 more hours what we are going to do, let's go back to the discussion related to GFA.
Thanks, Tamara. And in our defense, by the way, we were friends even before you made that announcement, just so.
Yes. And I must say, for my defense, since then I'm so busy that I had no time to make more friends, because my inbox is really full.
Amazing, amazing. No, thanks so much for sharing that, Tamara. I want to sort of go back to the discussion, and we'll come back to you, Tamara, as well, to share some of the other learnings and reflections, right? But, excuse me, let me start from Ebru. Ebru, you were there representing, Surti Enterprises, but also the textile sector as a whole. I mean, there was a lot of burden on Ebru's and Akhtar's shoulders because they weren't there just representing their companies, but the sector as a whole. So what do you think, Ebru? I mean, if you could share some of your reflections and key takeaways.
Yes, in fact, I think it was the summit happened at the right time, that we are having all post-COVID, midterm war, supply chain disruption discussions, and everything seems to be changing in the fashion landscape. And of course, we were given, the manufacturers, as a major part of the supply chain, were given some space even before the past couple of years. But I think now the whole fashion industry is seeing the imminent need and the essence and the importance of really collaborating with all the supply chain. So, it's not just like manufacturers being a part of the supply chain, but it's being how can we really approach the total fashion industry all together. So all the little stakeholders, everyone contributing to, whatever is on our agenda, because we've seen that the impact is imposed on all throughout, including the consumers. So we're not just talking about an industry, it's a part of our lives actually. So I always say we're realizing actually the climate crisis in our wardrobes. And it's not just like a part of the industry that is really having a say in all of this. So I think the summit was an opportunity to really build a stronger bridge between the brands, retailers, as well as the manufacturers. It's a dialogue. We need this dialogue, this communication, so that we can understand how to really help each other better and also become key and lock projects. I was really intrigued by the case study of Ganni. It was a smaller brand coming with a vision, and the whole panel was actually dissecting their approach and their future plans. So it was, I think, I was very inspired by it. I was inspired by most of the panels, but I was very inspired by the Ganni's approach as to how that model could be scaled onto a bigger scope throughout the industry.
Yeah.
And I think Pakistan represents at scale production. So that's where we come to be very important. And we discussed this with you, informally, how our representation, how the region's representation could be improved as well.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, Ebru. And I have one more question, but I'll sort of let you mull over that while I go to the rest of the panel, which is, if you think about one thing that we should change the way we do things, or one thing that we should do differently about our sector, right? What would that be? I'll come back to you with that question. But Brooke, as Ebru was talking about the relationship between manufacturers and brands, I remember you had a very interesting approach to thinking to it, right? Which was the outsourcing model. Like it was outsourced and now it has to be insourced again, right? And that is the transition of the brand. Do you want to share that and then add up your reflections as well?
Yeah, I can share that thinking a little bit. I should share before I do that, just for the audience, just so that they understand the context here. So I'm a journalist, and this is the fourth summit that I've attended. So this year, in preparation for the summit, I looked at the science-based data around climate and around the industry and asked myself, this is my yardstick for this summit. I asked myself, where is the tangible proof that this year's summit will result in a complete change of course for the industry? Because every summit before this has committed to driving that. But every year since then, climate impacts have got worse. So the sustainability dialogue's increased, the number of initiatives has increased, the number of business models has increased, but the net effect of that is a continuing trajectory towards climate crisis. So what I really wanted to understand from this summit was what is being presented that will buck that trend. And one of the comments that I made to Tala in our preparation was a reflection that I'd made on the course of the industry from decades ago. So I'm fortunate that I've just written a book on behalf of Blue Sign on the history of the fashion industry. So I'm primed on this. But a part of that was researching the mass outsourcing of brands, of their supply chains to Asia from the 60s onwards, and the handing over of the responsibility for the supply chain. And that in contrast to where we find ourselves now, which is our brands didn't really want the burden of the supply chain and the cost and the complexity, but now that's becoming their Achilles heel. Not understanding the supply chain, not understanding how to measure it, not even being able to map it, has become a source of tremendous risk. And I have it on authority from CEOs that shareholders and investors are now beginning to ask them to map and measure supply chain related risks in the same manner that they do fiduciary risks. So there's a tremendous pressure on understanding the supply chain, connecting with the supply chain, working with the supply chain. And I think that's sort of one of the, I guess, the key reckonings, I would say, that became poignant during the summit.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Brooke. Because you're spot on. I mean, that transition is not easy, right? Because the capability that the brands have is very much on marketing, design, and sales side of it. But suddenly they have to learn how to put the product together, which is ironic because that's what they're selling.
Absolutely. And this is where it's difficult, because a summit like the Global Fashion Summit is ostensibly the convening of the global industry. But in an article I'll have published this afternoon on Forbes, I've conducted a really rigorous assessment of the summit's schedule and representatives. And despite, for example, China producing over 40% of the global industry's apparel and the majority of its textiles, there wasn't a single representative from the industry in China. Yeah. Not one. So how can we say that this is a global summit when such a critical facet of the industry is not in attendance and not having a voice? How can we understand the problems in the supply chain, which is where most of the impact is, if those people are not speaking? We can't really discuss sustainability or continue to discuss sustainability in marketing terms because it hasn't worked and it won't work. So I think this is there's a sort of illusion of sustainability where because we're hearing it more, we think it's happening more. But actually, we need to be far more critical. Journalists like myself need to be far more critical. It's that thing of what you see is all there is. We have to be careful of that. Yeah. We really, really do.
You have to take that with a pinch of salt, right? I'll move on to Akhtar. Because Akhtar, I know, by the way, for those of us who do not know, Akhtar is the director of marketing for Gul Ahmed. And he was there with us as well, along with Abu from Pakistan. I remember after many discussions we were having when we were sitting next to each other, and the panel was, the brands were talking about sustainability and all that. And then one voice that was there from the suppliers on the main stage, it was from Bangladesh. And Bangladesh was, you may see them on the panel, you can see them around the panel as well, because they've been showing their face and they've been joining these summits and discussions for a very long time. And there were some comments that the Bangladesh panelists made, which was specifically around pricing, to say, listen, all of the sustainability talk is great and brilliant, but when it comes to actual money changing hands, it's the price that only matters. I know Akhtar had an interesting look on his face when the comment was made. Akhtar, do you want to sort of share your reflections?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. And myself, Akhtar Said from Gul Ahmed Textile. Well, my reflection from this session is, I think I can categorize them into three buckets. So first is a calibration and learning. I think session like these, as in manufacturing concern, we have a lot of initiative in our house. And when we listen and hear what others are doing, so it does provide a good amount of calibration, okay, where we are and what exactly the world is needing right now. So I think with respect to the sustainability and the circularity and the 5 priorities by the GFA Monitor Report, if I see, So I think yes, we are pretty much on the target. With respect to the learning, I must say, I really enjoyed this last session of storytelling and linking the sustainability with storytelling. And I think most of the marketing and most of the words that we hear about sustainability, it's like we all gonna die, let's do something. So it's like instilling the fear, and rather than not focusing on the hopes and the positive sides of the world and its resources. So that's one, and I think it does provide a good amount of calibration for us that what we are doing and what world is doing. So we see that, yes, it provides a good support. Second, we are a manufacturing concern, so it provides a very good networking opportunity, right? So yes, I was able to connect with lots of brands, and it does provide a very good business sense. And I think what Brooks mentioned earlier, that so many conferences and so many talks about sustainability, but our impact with respect to the sustainability on the world is not reflecting the same thing. So it's because I think the more we interact with the brands, the better it is. And finally, third is the overall vibe from the session. I've gone through with lots of this innovation product in the stands, and there is a very few representation from the manufacturing setup. I think I was the only one from Pakistan side there, along with Tala. So I think when I saw different companies presenting their products with respect to the sustainability, and I was thinking about that if we really want to create a good impact with respect to sustainability, then we need to have the good amount of alliances where the suppliers should, as a manufacturer should bring their product range, which are designed with respect to the sustainability and the circularity, and the brand should actually engage with them and bring alliances and the corporations into it. That's the only way in which we can create a true sensing change. And also, there was so much talks with respect to the alliances, but yes, when it comes to the pricing matters, I think somebody during the session said that the brands are operating with a colonial mindset, right? And there is a clothing dictatorship by the brands in this sector. And it appears that the people who are taking decisions with respect to the purchasing and the people who are talking about the sustainability, I think they are two different teams. And that's why it creates the problem. Because when they talk about actually placing the business, it's an entirely different team. And when they talk about the sustainability, it appears to be that they have an entirely separate team. So one solution could be to have more interaction between the brands and the manufacturers and have a good marketplace like of sustainable products. The suppliers, the manufacturers should present all their products with respect to sustainability, and the brand should actively engage and take their purchasing decisions according to that.
Yeah.
So yes, that's what I was thinking, and that's what I was reflecting on after the session.
No, thanks so much, Akhtar. I think, the one thing I didn't mention, the topic for this summit was alliances for the new era. So it was very pertinent to the point, Akhtar, that you're making, which is forming more alliances. But I think the key takeaway for us in Pakistan is that if you form alliances, we need to show our faces in these sessions as well, right? We need to be present there and engage in the dialogue. Sometimes the dialogue might sound fluff to us, let's be honest, because we kind of face the reality on the ground as manufacturers in Pakistan, right? But being engaged in the dialogue, that's where we can change the discussion. And that's what happened as well. There were many points where hard facts and truths were shared. The example you were giving about pricing was shared on the panel. The example about Uganda or Ghana being the waste capital of the world was shared on that panel as well in front of all the brands. Yeah. So that discussion sometimes became very real, which was very interesting.
Yeah, and at least it was good that they're open to listen, but also it was not a very global event, I must say. It's more like a Eurocentric event, right?
Yeah.
And not so much representation as I think somebody mentioned from China, who is the biggest manufacturer of the whole world, and also the Australia and the other brands were not there. It's more like a European approach of looking at this sustainability. Yes, it was not completely, or what should I say, the inclusivity of everybody into the sustainability, that wasn't there from that particular platform.
Yeah.
And I think you were mentioning, Talha, that what could be done better, right? How can we actually benefit? I think first of all that we believe that lots of good work being done in Pakistan at a country level. I think from ourselves, and I think if I see Surti is there, and then lots of good other players in Pakistan, they are doing wonderful job with respect to circularity, be it linked with the recycled cotton, and taking very, very nice initiative with respect to sustainability and the green energy sources. I think we need to showcase more and we need to engage more with the brands so that they should know that they have the options of the suppliers available from Pakistan who can create impact, right?
Yeah.
I think in that particular GFA session, all this innovation platform on the first floor, I think in the gallery area, I think the kind of solutions which I saw, and I think all of these solutions, I think is pretty much, we can do the same kind of work or even something in some phases better than those people, right? So I think we need to show our faces from Pakistan in those platforms, and at the same time showcase our product range as well, which is specifically designed for the circularity and the sustainability.
Yeah. Brooke?
I was just going to add on that topic. I think Ebru raised a really, really important discussion that happened on the action stage with Gani. And I think it's almost a kind of a little bit of a window into how conversations could develop with Pakistan. Because what happened on that panel discussion was that the founder of the brand Gani, which is a global women's wear brand, it's a premium brand, but they've got 60 stores or so worldwide. They're expanding very quickly, part owned by LVMH. What they did was their founder said that they decided to channel the money they were spending on buying offsets to an insetting program.
Yeah.
Just the simplification of that the decision wasn't even really a kind of big financial one. It was more a relinquishing of competitiveness one, because shifting those funds from offsetting to insetting meant investing in solar infrastructure for a factory that their competitor brands were also using.
Yeah.
But they decided, if we're spending the money anyway, let's make it be more useful and let's make it pay dividends against our targets, our environmental targets. So even that, just like unlocking that little bit of existing funding and rechanneling it to somewhere, I felt was very interesting. And another interesting facet of that panel discussion was that there happened to be someone in the audience from a competitor brand called Marimekko from Finland, who put her hand up and said, "Thank you for sharing the name of that supplier you're working with in Portugal, because we work with them as well." Yeah. And she said, "We're actually looking at a biodiversity strategy. Would you be willing to talk to us about what you've done already?"
Yeah.
And the Gani team were like, "Yeah, cool, let's do that." So it's like, okay, so maybe Marimekko can now leverage what's already been done rather than spending the money again for the biodiversity surveys. Leverage what's been done and put those funds into kind of supercharging that insetting. So it was so simple, so like unorchestrated. It just required the right people to be in the room discussing what it was like on the ground. And my thoughts were, if you added the suppliers to that discussion, right? If, if Ramil and Rodriguez were there as well,
yes,
they could talk to Marimekko directly. They could talk to, that room was full of competitor brands. Everyone wants to know what Gani's doing. They could have tapped, I don't know how many brands, and brought them into the program. So I feel like it needs, this is why it's so important that representatives from manufacturers who are experts, who know how this works on the ground, are in the room, because then this can truly be a beneficial dialogue, and it can set up the kind of investment needed, Tala, that you described, this 1 billion for infrastructure, which obviously goes into the funds that the likes of what, Tamara is setting up in AII. But this is surely a catalyst.
Yeah. No, Brooke, you're spot on. I just want to correct one thing after we were talking about, I think it was Ebru, you and I, all three for Pakistan, representing the manufacturers. And I just sort of this is a nice segue to Tamara as well, because Tamara, this is exactly the kind of role that you guys will be playing, right? Which is, on one side, we're aligning brands, and the idea is to get those brands together. and then develop programs. And I think that the way Pakistan is kind of coming into play, the way we foresee ourselves playing a role in that, is we align the suppliers and the sector in a similar way, right? Where those programs can be deployed to elevate the whole sector. I mean, imagine, Brooke, I mean, just taking Ghani's example, right? They're working with a specific supplier, but Ghani, the kind of vision that they have, if they have a program on which they can invest and impact the whole sector, and they have other brands investing, they'll be more than happy to sort of join that and jump on that, right? But they just need to be shown those opportunities and be guided to move towards them, right? And Tamara, you'll be playing a huge role in that, right?
Absolutely. But I also wanted to say, like, I think the whole summit was really under this collaboration idea, and you could see really a lot of collaborations and a lot of people talking about collaboration. What I think is very important also for Pakistan is coming from collaboration. That means sitting together and eventually discussing what will be your targets and where do you want to be, coming into an action mode. And that is something I feel where suppliers play a very integral role. So one thing, the GFA team published their Tfa Monitor Report, right, which they use to guide the fashion leaders towards a net positive fashion industry. And they looked in 5 areas like resource stewardship, secure work environments, material choices, wage systems, and circular systems. And then they spoke about actions. And I think that's where people need to align, right? So what are the actions? How do we measure the impact? How do we drive them at scale? What is the investments needed? So we do still need to increase energy efficiency. We still need to scale up renewables. We still need to divert coal use, right? And I think that's where the Apparel Impact Institute comes into the play is, yes, we do look into the fund. We are building out that fund for the 250 million to then unlock 2 billion of blended capital. And what I see is like, even, I mean, we have the fund, but we also have work and programs outside the fund, which are...
I think we lost Tamara for a bit. So sorry, we lost you for a bit. You said we have funds and we have programs outside of the fund.
Yes.
That's where we lost you.
So, right. So we have programs outside the fund that we are already running for a while, which are all about taking action. And I see brands collaborating in a pre-competitive space, nominating the same suppliers into programs, and help drive them to become more energy efficient. Still, I love to see more suppliers on the table, and I love to see more manufacturers in general on the table, because I want to hear and understand what are their barriers, right? What are the suppliers' barriers to coal phase out? And I think that's what are the barriers for adopting more renewable energy? What even are the barriers for energy efficiency? I want to understand that really from a supplier side and not from my fancy office side. And I want to understand that in every single location. I don't want to understand that only for Pakistan. I don't want to understand it only for Bangladesh or China, because I know it's different everywhere in the world. And these would be the voices I would like to hear in future summits. And someone like you, Tala, and your organization are so well placed to bring together the voices of a country and the needs of a country. So I'm totally open to hear from Pakistan and every other country, so in case someone else listens, what are the needs of the manufacturers? What are the barriers? What can we do better? What can we do different? How can we deploy money correctly in order to drive impact and to drive action?
Yeah. And I mean, just wonder, I'm not, so in my confession, right? I don't manufacture any product. I don't have a factory I own, and I don't employ any people in those factories. So I can say stuff without sort of feeling the burn from it. But the reflection I have as I've been engaging with manufacturers, I think some of us have gone to that mindset as well, which is like, okay, well, brands are dictatorial, and that's how the world works, and we just need to cater to the brands and whatever. But there needs to be a mindset shift as well, which is we need to keep raising our voice, even though we know it's going to take a bit of time, and keep sort of talking about our challenges and issues, right, at these platforms. I think, Tamara, that's what you're hinting at, right? Like, just don't
stop
protesting.
Like, bridging suppliers' needs with brands' expectations. I think that's still a spot where we could be more active.
Yeah.
Can I reflect on this one? So,
After gone?
yeah, I think Tamara, very nice. I think we are from the manufacturing side. We are not using coal at all, but I think I can say something with that angle. I think somebody during the session in GFA, I think somebody called Alexander, maybe, I think from Fairware, somebody.
Yeah, Alexander, Fairware Foundation.
Fairware Foundation, right? So he mentioned about the sustainable costing, right? So you need to cost out the product having all the necessary ingredients to it. So if somebody, let's say, is using coal and you want it, okay, let's just eliminate the coal. Okay, we are not talking about the energy efficiencies inside the factory, but we are talking about, let's just eliminating the coal. There will be certain impact in the overall value chain of the textiles of eliminating that coal. Are the brands or are the buyers are willing to absorb that particular change into their costing? So if they are not, then any manufacturer will stick to it. That's how it works, right? And I think when this guy Alexander mentioned that the situation on the production floor regarding the wages and the worker health and the environment is the direct reflection of the purchasing practices between the buyer and the seller. And I think it's a very nice point that this guy made, that that's how it works. And same goes again with the water recycling, right? Yes, there are technologies available that you can have absolutely zero liquid discharge, right? But if we try to find out a solution at an industry level, at a country level, yes, it is viable. But if any single supplier wants to go with ZLD or zero liquid discharge, their customer will not be able to bear the price of it.
Yeah.
Right? So it is like it's a picture, and everybody has a very small part of it.
Yeah.
All need to work together, and all need to understand the limitation of the other side.
Yeah.
Just by saying that, okay, we'll do this and the other will not do this, that's how not going to work. We all need to collaborate, no doubt about it. And we all need to be very much open that what kind of challenges are there. If somebody is doing ZLD, he needs to be given the preferences with respect to the orders. As simple as this. But if the buyers are only taking the stance based upon the lowest possible cost, as somebody mentioned that all the brands during the session, somebody said that all the brands are raced to the bottom of the lowest prices. That creates the problem. I don't know.
May I contribute to Saeed's point, because
Whatever.
it's very relevant. It's quite relevant. It's very, on the point. And this is a really very important, bigger discussion that we need to tackle in working groups, not really on like stages. The action stage actually was even a more intimate kind of setup that we can discuss more openly. The main stage does not really allow much of these discussions to really appear. So I would suggest to have like working groups where we can sit together with brands, the manufacturers are there, the impact funds are there, and we have an open discussion. Especially the first half of the first day was dedicated more to legislations, regulations, upcoming, changes. But post-summit, we also have seen that the Green New Deal is not really happening to the extent that everyone is hoping for. So it's not becoming mandatory. So there's this whole arena of regulations that some of the industry leaders are depending on, but then we have all the involuntary like necessities that we need to tackle as the whole supply chain. So carbon taxation, it's not going to happen very soon. We've seen it. Green New Deal, most targets that the countries, EU countries are even setting up, it's not going to happen pretty soon. So what do we do? Like, what do we do without the imposed regulations? How can we really bring all this supply chain together? And as even Tamara was referring, as Saeed was referring, how can we really start this very genuine discussion to really look out for the solutions? Because that's what we need. We're talking alliances, we're talking decarbonization, we're talking impact. So what's the impact? Who will own the impact? It's not just one party who should own the impact. The impact is for all of us. It's for the future of our kids of the whole world. That's what we need to really get into detail and formulate, draw best practices out. The Ganya example was good because it was a good practice and it was very open. It was laid out. There were science-based targets. There were manufacturers referred to. So as Brooke was mentioning, what if they were even on board on that panel? What exposure could they have? So I think these are like the dynamics. We need to bring on the real dynamics, not like, the proper formal presentations where we clap and then leave the room. So that's what we need to really change.
And what I would like to add, oops, sorry, that's like a very emotional point for all of us, right?
If that's the thing. I think I just let Brooke, I think Brooke wanted to say something as well for a while. Yeah. I'll let Brooke sort of chime in and then I'll come to you.
Yes, just briefly, because I actually made it my business at the summit to interview some impact investors and try to get to the bottom of their priorities and their approach to investment, knowing full well that the investment needs to be in the supply chain, because that's where the greatest impacts and the biggest urgency is. And frankly, I was disheartened in a sense, because the portfolio managers I spoke to and the investors I spoke to were operating under the existing fiduciary models that assess risk based on climate, economy, governance. So on all those levels, if you look at any manufacturing country in the global south, it is likely to be deemed exceedingly high risk. So I worry that the investor's priority is not only the global south, but speaking with brands in the global south about what their pain points are and where they think the investment should be. It doesn't seem like the right approach to me. And so within my report, which is, as I said, is going on Forbes this afternoon, you can see more detail there, but I am approaching this new wave of investor interest with caution, because I think, once again, it is really there to deliver profit. That's the fiduciary mandate, not solve climate change. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about that. And I think that leads on to an answer to what Ebru was just talking about, which is everything in this discussion comes down to risk. A brand will get involved, I believe, and from my understanding in my interviews, a brand will get involved in their supply chain and take a vested interest in their supply chain if the risks become so high that it is more expensive not to do so. I think that's what we're playing with here. And I think as the industry progresses towards worse impacts and greater regulation, the gap is closing. But there needs to be a recognition that these problems won't be solved on the word of brands. With brands, yes, but not upon the word, or let's say the intel from brands. So this risk piece, I think, is so fundamental. It has, for those in the supply chain, they have to demonstrate that the cost of not investing in their infrastructure and not supporting their transition to net zero is going to be too high.
Yeah. Or Brooke, or the other way to look at that as well. And thank you so much for sharing that, by the way. And just a bit of self-promotion. I think, Brooke, you kindly spoken about Net Zero Pakistan in there as well. So thank you so much for that in your article. But just look at, like, I think the other way to look at that as well is if we can, to Akhtar's point, if we can create programs that are not limited to just one piece of the puzzle, right? Which is not just about one company or one industry, but about across sector, that helps de-risk the project as well, which is the impact is going to be at scale across the whole sector. And I would love to sort of get, I mean, one of our friends who's joined the discussion is Nin Kossel. I don't know if Nin is still there with us, but Nin is one of the leaders at Reverse Resources, a company that did a massive recycling piece of work in Bangladesh. And again, that's a great example of something like that, a program like that we should intake and do something similar in Pakistan, whether we're recycling or any other topic. Was a great example of transforming the whole sector, right? Not just one company. But Nin, I mean, I'm sorry to put you on the spotlight. I don't know if you are still here. Hey, there you are. So great to see you here.
Oh,
Lynn, any thoughts, any reflection? We'd love to know more about that program and what can we take from there and what can we do in Pakistan around it.
yeah, I think there's a lot of learnings and experiences that can be replicated in Pakistan from the Circular Fashion Partnership project in Bangladesh. Of course, there's going to be a lot of differences and nuances as we see within every manufacturing country. However, there's some really basic things that can take place that really help solve some of these really critical market barriers to effective circular economies. One of them just being better waste handling practices and segregation of recyclable waste at source. If you don't mix your cutting waste together, it increases in value instantly. And mechanical recyclers get a better quality recycled fiber and yarn, it dyes better, it's better, you know, we've proven that time and time again, pre-segregated waste traced through the platform, you get better results and lower rates of contamination. So there's simple things that you can do that can support the recycling industry. And Pakistan's in a really great place because there is such an active recycling industry already within the country. So it's about how to really help that existing industry raise its standards, valorize the textile waste to its optimum potential, and potentially as well also attract some chemical recycling technologies to the country. So there's a good recycling ecosystem set up. So yeah, this is the kind of the aims of the project, and we're doing similar work as well with Fashion for Good in India, which again has similarities to Pakistan and differences and different challenges. But this sort of formalization and of the circular supply chain needs to happen for circular economy to materialize and to scale at the speed that we need it to.
Yeah, and then I mean the interesting the part I love about it is that that whole piece of work that you guys did with Circular Fashion Partnership included many different brands coming together, as well as many different suppliers coming together, and it was in the pre-competitive space, right? So it is the kind of the concept or the playbook for how to develop programs for supply chain at scale in sector, right? Even if it's not recycling, if it's whatever it is, that's the way to develop programs. And I think it addresses. I'm just cautious of time as well. We're getting a bunch of questions in the panel. I think some of the questions are specifically around, well, how do you get premium from brands? How do you get brands engaged? So I think that is specifically the kind of stuff that Nin and the team did in Bangladesh is a good example of how we develop programming. The things that we're planning to sort of, in our discussion with many of the members we have here as well, there are 4 or 5 areas we've identified to do at scale stuff that ranges from biomass supply chain to recycling to industrial solar to water treatment to organic cotton. And these are areas through which we can develop programs and do at scale stuff. I'll just go through some of the questions and throw them at the panel to see if we have any thoughts on that. One of the questions we're getting is well, that's a specifically for a very, very sort of targeted question for you, Tamara, which is, can your fund sponsor studies on organic cotton versus conventional impacts in a certain region? I don't know if you have any answer to that.
That is one of the key questions. I mean, like on what we can fund at the moment. So maybe I need to put that into perspective. We've just launched the fund. We are still in a fundraising stage. And we are, parallel to the fund, are developing a climate solutions portfolio. So we will have an intake process for programs or solutions, whichever these are, into the program, into the solutions portfolio that then link the money to the fund. So the money of the fund will be used for those solutions. And once we have an official call for programs to come into that solutions portfolio, anyone could try to get into that, right? We will have some quality criteria of what we will expect, and we will continue that discussion. We have a governance process around who and which activities will be selected, and then we will be ready to go.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Tamara. I think there are a bunch of questions specifically around, well, how do we support farmers upstream to increase their production because our production has gone down? How do we get EU to transfer technologies to countries like Pakistan? How do we get the brands to pay premium for some of these products? Again, my sense, but I'd love to sort of hear your reflection. My sense is by creating programs that actually de-risk the investment, as well as programs that have an at-scale impact, and define the mechanics on how brands can get involved. I mean, just expecting brands to pay premium without the mechanics of linking that premium to the impact and creating transparency around that is quite crucial. And I believe from what I'm hearing from you guys and the brands as well, is that just coming up with a solution or an approach specifically for one factory or one supplier is very difficult. It doesn't make economic sense. If there is an approach and a solution that gets applied to many different suppliers, then the brands will be more keen to listen and they'll be more willing to engage. Obviously, there are brands who are not so sure about sustainability as a whole, and that's a different ballgame. But those who are committed are looking for answers and looking for ways through which they can get involved. And the onus is on us to come up with that approach as well and sort of share with them, along with them. But I mean, I'll let you guys jump in and add as well if there's anything else.
I think working around the organic cotton, I think, and developing products regarding it and offering it to the brand, I think that's a good way in which, because it sells good and also it empowers the people who are doing it. So I think from Pakistan, having organic products, it will add a lot of value to the farmers, and also there is a premium in it.
Yeah. And I think the alliances for a new era will require the competition to ally as well. So if we're defining a region expertise and visibility, it will require a lot of action. And I think, Talha, your organization could be very impactful there to really bring the collective efforts of the competition from the Pakistan region and make whatever we have in the region visible to the industry, to the brands and retailers. Because most of the time, and I visit customers globally, I realize that they're not truly aware of the infrastructure that Pakistan is. Both the challenges as well as the technologies used, the water savings, the organic cotton impact, and how Pakistan is really investing in green energy. Most of this is not really laid out. So we have to really communicate this very well. And that also comes along with actually producing innovative products. So Pakistan is able to really manufacture to the needs of the premium brands, but this is not really known or recognized in the market. So it's all a collective effort that we need to bring forth in a very dedicated and collective manner.
Yeah. And I just, one word that I heard a lot, and guys, you jump in here, like, so we're circularity, right? Like there was so much talk on circularity. Now, what I hear from the manufacturers in Pakistan is actually when you look at, for example, some of the folks that we have on the screen as well, but I'm sure other manufacturers, everybody has a recycling plant or a machine installed. There is stuff happening. But so guide me here. I feel we're doing a lot of that stuff in Pakistan. Probably we're not able to brand our product in that way and package that around it, because clearly there is a need for more circularity. There's a need for more end of use rather than end of life products. And so is that the disconnect? Is just the marketing or the messaging the disconnect, or is there some technology missing, or there's something else we need as well?
I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I think when circularity is difficult, because if it's a brand talking about circularity, they're probably talking about end of life, resale, rental, those kind of end of life type elements of circularity. They're not necessarily thinking about fibers or the entire cycle from design to end of life. So there's a bit of a terminology issue there. And also the industry has traditionally gone for the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to circularity. So it has been those kind of take back schemes or the resale and rental opportunities that have been the main focus. I think there needs to actually be a kind of convening around circularity, more education around circularity, and an understanding that it's really only circularity in the material sense, in the actual fiber sense, that's going to reduce emissions and reduce environmental impacts enough to make the difference it needs to.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of course of time, there's one question we have in the panel, which is when the EU legislations are being made around this, and I know there's some sort of legislation happening in the US as well. Are suppliers involved in, and I don't know if this is the right group to ask that question, but are suppliers involved in those discussions around legislations, or is any voice from suppliers getting into those forums?
In terms of the Fashion Act?
The Fashion Act or other legislation or policies, right? How is suppliers' voice getting there? How can we get the suppliers' voice there?
Yeah, so that's a good one, because I can speak about the Fashion Act. It's the American Apparel and Footwear Association that's lobbying against the Fashion Act on behalf of brands, actually. So brands have a very strong voice in that discussion, and are trying to reduce the breadth of the Act by saying that certain requirements within the Act are beyond their abilities, or beyond their scope, or beyond their resources. So actually, I think that's shorthand for we don't own that part of our supply chain, so it would be very difficult for us to be held accountable for it. So I think that's probably highlighting where supplier and manufacturer and supply chain voices could actually shed light, but that may not be the kind of light that those brands want shed. That may be an inconvenient light, let's say.
Yes, yes, no, you're right.
I don't want to, I'm a realist, I'm a pragmatist. I'm just saying it from a reporting point of view, not judgment, just observation.
Yes, no, great. Well, any sort of last reflections or comments? I just want to wrap up really quickly, and then, we can end on time.
I would just add one reflection from a previous point as well. I think it's this collective brand voice is really useful, because then, as you're talking about a collective approach of a lot of manufacturers offering those services, you on the other side need that collective brand voice to say, yes, we will pay that bit more together. We're spreading that risk. We're doing this within a pre-competitive space, and getting the brands to sort of commit on group also quite helps, because there's a little bit of, FOMO comes in as well, that other brands are doing something that they're not, and it creates a very good kind of environment, you could say. And also, when you've got that collective brand voice pushing for some change, it also helps getting the investment to come in to that country, because you can see that there's the demand there's the potential business coming through. So yeah, I would just say it's the grouping of the manufacturers and the grouping of the brands together is the ideal scenario.
It's nirvana for us, right? And I think that's the role that Tamara's organization is playing as well, and Tamara as well as others, right? I mean, getting the brands together and creating their voice, but actually putting money where their mouth is as well. That's what makes it real, right? And then on the other side, you need the suppliers to come up with that and sort of raise themselves to the pedestal and come with the sort of ideas and projects on which you can actually engage them as well. And that's an interesting wrap up, because I think if I think about the takeaways from our discussion, one, I think that there were a lot of positive, the discussions that are happening, there are the right voices being shared at this point. There's definitely a lot more work to be done. But I think the key takeaway for Pakistan is we just need to be present. Whenever we get an opportunity to show our face somewhere and share our story, let's go and show our face and share our story and narrative. Not just story, I think to Akhtar's point, we need to also share our work and products, because that would show the real thing happening in Pakistan, right? The second is, I think, coming up with the programs that have impact across the whole sector and defining the mechanics around those and getting the brands involved and engaging those brands is, I think, the right next step, not just for Pakistan, but other supply chain countries as well, that we should think more about. I think that just ending, I think one thing that we're planning to organize, I'm not going to give a specific date right now, but we are working with AII and we'll include other friends as well, and doing a webinar with brands on which we will share the work that is happening in Net Zero Pakistan. And but beyond that, we're also going to share with them the 3-4 ideas that we have for at-scale decarbonization projects. Get the brands to engage on those ideas, engage them in signing up on those projects and programs. And then building on that, we're going to put together the feasibilities and the working groups to actually build these up with the brands and the funders and the experts. So that's how we're planning to take our learnings forward for Pakistan and see where it lands us, because the need is not for us to stop sort of just talking about it, but actually take some practical actions, right? And hopefully it lead in the right direction. And with expertise from folks like Nen, Brooke, and you guys who've seen that happen in other countries. I mean, we need more of that in Pakistan as well, right? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm sorry I wasn't able. I tried to tackle most of these questions that we had and lump them together. I hope they were answered in the discussion. I found the discussion quite engaging because I was able to. I like the sound of my voice, but I'm sure, I hope you like the discussion from the other folks as well. Thank you so much for joining, and